Hey everyone, it's Adam with Milo's Restoration. Also, Francie's Construction Services, if you ever wanted to look my business up and get some information about me. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video today about lacquering this set of nightstands. They're kind of like a French Provincial style, so they got a lot of curves, different angles to them, stuff like that. That's kind of makes it harder to work with. She wanted a gloss peach lacquer, so that was what I did. And I'm going to show you my process for that. So basically, I just wiped them down with some alcohol to clean them before I got started, and I applied some aqua coat grain filler, and I used a spatula, and I also used like a microfiber on the edges and the curved areas to just kind of rub it in and just make sure I got all the extra off. Honestly, I don't know if I'm going to use this product again unless it's like a flat surface. It's definitely not something I would want to use on curves. And yeah, it's okay. It's not my favorite product though. So after I did a little bit of grain filling and I filled in those holes, those nail holes, I started with this Nylox brush. This is like 220 grit. It's very fine. And basically it's just a drill brush, it's just an attachment. It's made of nylon and it sands kind of, a way to sand the curves faster. I'll hand sand the flutes, but other than that, I'll try to just get all the sanding done with this. And yeah, really, if you've seen my previous videos, it's a different way from finishing a piece that has been previously finished with really anything. It's just not the same. The grain is going to want to raise. You're going to be dealing with different problems. It's harder in some ways and easier in others. And generally speaking, I'd say that I actually prefer to finish pieces that have already been finished, but it's okay. I can do either way. I can really. The good thing about using starting from raw wood, you have more options because basically every primer would prefer that it be used on raw wood. That's the ideal scenario, and because of that, you have a lot more options. So my first round of sanding was done with 220 and 180, and I made sure that everything was very well sanded. Then mixed up some vinyl sealer, and I used about 30% thinner, probably maybe 20. It's half lacquer thinner and half lacquer retarder. I just prefer that mix, but I adjust it day by day depending on humidity and temperature and other conditions like that. Generally speaking, I feel like it's better to add more thinner and less retarder. So my compressor setup, I've got a 60-gallon Ingersoll Rand with a few little kind of cheap air dryers on it, and I just hook them up in series and just try to get as much of the water out as I can. I use a Performance by 3M spray gun, and I'm using a 1.3 or a 1.5 tip, and I run about 20 psi whenever I'm spraying this vinyl sealer. So I did 2 or 3 coats of vinyl sealer, and in between I would fill any areas that I saw that needed filling. I use this water-based compound for filling. It's just like it's sold at Home Depot. Basically, it's just like a kind of mixture between a drywall mud and a wood filler. It's non-sanded though, so it doesn't have any of that like sandy or gritty texture to it, and that makes it pretty optimal for filling things like this that have to be really fine. I just don't really like the sanded fillers very much. I forgot to say earlier, but this color is Certain Peach by Sherwin-Williams, and it's hand mixed in a vinyl sealer and in a lacquer. So the color will never be perfect, but it's pretty close. And I think it looked great when all was said and done. But the vinyl sealer was definitely a little bit lighter than the lacquer turned out, and I actually think I prefer the color of the lacquer. But sometimes, it depends on the scenario, but you can just go over a vinyl sealer with a clear lacquer, and that's really all you do. But with this many curved surfaces and just these little ornate areas and everything, I knew that I was going to catch areas where I would mess up at and not be able to spray continuously. And as a consequence of that, I'd have to sand those areas to fix them. And anytime you sand that vinyl sealer, you kind of alter the way that the pigments show up. And so whenever you go over it with a clear, you can see those areas. So basically, your final coat of vinyl sealer, if you're going to clear over it, you can't sand it. You have to let it be what it is. So at this point, I'm using a very fine by Surf Prep pad. I'm using the Surf Prep sander, and it's really smooth. Like this, the sanding at this point should be very very fine and very kind of finished to the area that really adapted to the surface that you are working on. And what I mean by that is if you're on a flat surfaces show imperfections more than curved surfaces do. The curved surfaces and the very like ornate and carved areas don't have to be sanded quite as well as the flat surfaces do. Just something to think about. I think this was my last coat of sealer. I put about 3 coats on total. I was planning on going it over it with a clear, but I decided with all these curved areas and stuff like that, it was just going to be too hard. I knew I was going to mess up somewhere and have to sand. So I didn't. I just went with the vinyl sealer and just went with a colored lacquer. Same brand, Mohawk. And I had it tinted in 80 sheen, and you'll see that next here. So I'm mixing up the lacquer here, and it's the same color, certain peach, and I'm using 15% lacquer thinner and about 15% lacquer retarder. So you can see that I'm using a different kind of spray gun than I was. I'm not using that air compressor gun anymore. I'm using a turbine spray gun, and this is a Graco Edge something, like Edge 3 or Edge 4, something like that, whatever it is. And basically, I just prefer this gun for this purpose because when you're spraying lacquer, you're trying to keep the sheen consistent, and you need to transfer as much material to the surface as possible in the shortest amount of time. And I just feel like that gun is a lot better for that while still producing less overspray. Just some sanding in between coats of lacquer. It's starting to look pretty good, but it definitely still needs some more work and some more coats. So yeah, I think I put about 3 coats on total. So just my way of spraying an area like this. Do what you want, but this is kind of the way that I think that I like to do it, and it seems to serve me pretty well. I usually spray the curved areas first, or the areas that take a lot of different angles to hit, and I just let the overspray fall. And then what I do is on the flat areas, particularly the, I guess you would say, horizontal surfaces, I load them up with a lot of lacquer, and that way I know that it's going to cover up a lot of that overspray. Might sound kind of bad, but it is what it is, and it seems to work okay. This was right before the last coat, and as you can see, you can really start to see the gloss. It's really starting to shine. Honestly, it probably could have been good after the second coat, but just decided to do another sanding and another coat of lacquer. And yeah, they turned out pretty well after this final coat here. So the client found these hardware on eBay, and because of the shape of the drawers, we were kind of limited on what they could choose. But they ended up finding these hardware, and they had just 3 brass screws that went in the front. So I just laid out where the first screw would go at, and then I straightened them up after that and put the other 2 screws in, and that was it. So here they are in their finished state. The client seemed to like them a lot, and yeah, I really like the way they look too. Sorry for the kind of messy video, but you can really see the gloss in them, and the 80 sheen lacquer definitely looks good. It gives it that really kind of like high-end luxury look. And yeah, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Thank you.